Now that we have covered the theoretical foundations, we will move into the practical side of reservoir simulation. In the next section, we focus on how a reservoir engineer actually builds, runs, and updates a simulation model. In this workflow part, please think of the simulator not only as mathematics, but as a project process. A successful reservoir simulation study depends on good data collection, good model design, proper well controls, sensible outputs, and continuous validation. This slide summarizes a typical simulation workflow. First, gather and input rock and fluid data. Second, choose numerical grid features such as number of cells and cell sizes. Third, set the well controls, such as injection rates and bottom hole pressure constraints. These controls drive the dynamic behavior of the model. Finally, choose the outputs you want to save and analyze, such as average field pressure, cumulative oil, water and gas production, individual well pressures, and spatial saturation maps. This workflow is very important because it shows that simulation is not only about pressing run. It begins with reservoir description, continues through model setup and controls, and ends with analysis of the outputs for decision-making. The grid used in flow simulation is usually coarser than the grid used for the static geological model. Why? Because dynamic simulation can become extremely expensive if we keep geological scale detail everywhere. So engineers often create a coarser dynamic grid, especially in areas of less interest, while preserving important features where detailed flow behavior matters. This is one of the most practical examples of model simplification in reservoir engineering. We keep what matters most for flow, and we simplify what matters less. This slide continues the idea of moving from a static model to a dynamic one. Historically, this upscaling process has received much attention because it is crucial for preserving important reservoir behavior while reducing computational cost. The slide also makes an excellent point. If time allows, one ultimate consistency check is to run simulation at the geological grid scale. Such simulations may take a very long time, even weeks, but they can reveal whether the upscaled dynamic model is adequately representing fine-scale effects. In practice, this is not always feasible, but it highlights the importance of validating simplifications. History matching is one of the most important work processes in reservoir modeling. Once the model has been built and upscaled, the reservoir engineer compares model predictions against actual production data and well test data. If the model does not match the observed field behavior, parameters, or even parts of the underlying geological interpretation may need to be revised. History matching is not just curve fitting. It is a calibration process that aims to make the model consistent with reality while preserving geological plausibility. A good history match increases our confidence that the model can be used for forecasting. This slide shows the practical logic of history matching. We compare observed and predicted production data such as water rate, GOR, pressures, and cumulative production. If the fit is poor, we update parameters, generate a new model, run the simulation again, and repeat the process. The key message here is that changes should reflect improved understanding of the field geology and reservoir physics, not arbitrary tuning. For example, if permeability is adjusted in a zone, there should be a geological or engineering reason for that adjustment. History matching is valuable because it transforms the model from a theoretical construct into a more field-consistent predictive tool. Once a model is reasonably history matched, we can use it for future prediction of reservoir performance. This is one of the main reasons simulation is so valuable. We can forecast production decline, water breakthrough, recovery factor, pressure evolution, and the effects of possible development options. For example, we can ask, what happens if we add an injector, drill an infill producer, reduce a rate constraint, or implement an IOR method? The reservoir simulator helps answer these questions before the company commits capital and operations in the field. This quotation reminds us that uncertainty is always present. In reservoir simulation, we should not become overconfident just because we have a model. A model is an interpretation of reality, not reality itself. Good reservoir engineers begin with doubts, meaning they recognize uncertainty in geology, petrophysics, fluids, and measurements. By carefully testing, calibrating, and comparing alternatives, they move toward more reliable decisions. So uncertainty is not a weakness of simulation. It is an inherent part of subsurface engineering that must be acknowledged and communicated. This slide classifies major uncertainty into three types: uncertainty due to lack of data, uncertainty due to lack of knowledge, and uncertainty due to imprecise measurements. This is a very useful framework. Lack of data means we simply do not have enough wells, tests, or measurements. Lack of knowledge means we may have data, but still not fully understand geological architecture or processes. Imprecise measurements mean that the data we have may contain errors or limitations. In practice, all three types usually exist together. Possible sources of error include uncertainty in reservoir size, areal extent, thickness, net to gross, facies distribution, faults, porosity, permeability, and fluid properties such as viscosity and formation volume factor. In other words, uncertainty enters almost every part of the simulation model. That is why uncertainty handling is a major topic in reservoir engineering. Decision makers need to know not only the base case forecast, but also the range of possible outcomes. A responsible engineer does not present a single number as if it were guaranteed. A responsible engineer presents a forecast together with its uncertainty. This slide points toward a modern development in reservoir engineering. Advanced machine learning can help reduce uncertainty. Machine learning can be used for property prediction, history matching acceleration, proxy modeling, uncertainty quantification, and rapid screening of development scenarios. However, I want to emphasize something important to students. Machine learning does not replace physics or engineering judgment. It is most powerful when it complements physics-based simulation. In the future, the combination of reservoir simulation and machine learning will become increasingly important in petroleum engineering, carbon storage, and energy transition technologies. Reservoir simulation may be applied at any stage of field life, early, middle, or late. This slide introduces its role during the appraisal stage. At this stage, simulation helps design the overall field development plan. Engineers use simulation to evaluate likely recovery mechanisms, determine what facilities may be required, estimate compression or separation capacities, decide the number and locations of wells, and even plan the drilling sequence. So reservoir simulation is already valuable before large-scale production begins. At the appraisal stage, the simulation model may still carry significant uncertainty because data are limited. But even then, it is useful because it helps organize our understanding and test development concepts. We can ask questions like, should the field rely mainly on depletion, water flooding, or gas injection? How many wells may be needed? What type of infrastructure could be required? This demonstrates that simulation is not only for mature fields with abundant history data. It is also a strategic planning tool in the early life of an asset. In a mature field, reservoir simulation becomes a reservoir management tool. At this stage, we have actual production history, pressure data, cumulative oil, water cuts, and GOR values. This data allows us to history match the model more effectively and evaluate different development options for mature fields. Simulation can help determine whether infill drilling is worthwhile, whether injection should be modified, whether sweep efficiency can be improved, and how to maximize remaining value from the reservoir. In the later stages of field life, the question becomes, is it still worth studying the reservoir further? Very often, the answer is yes. Reservoir simulation can identify opportunities to extend field life through new drilling technology, stimulation campaigns, improved oil recovery methods, or revised operating strategies. So even near abandonment, a good simulation study may reveal a new lease of life for the reservoir. This is one reason simulation remains valuable throughout the full field life cycle. This slide broadens the application of reservoir simulation beyond traditional oil and gas production. Reservoir simulation is also essential for CO2 storage projects. In that context, the simulator helps predict plume migration, pressure buildup, structural and residual trapping, dissolution, and long-term containment. This is especially relevant today because petroleum engineering is increasingly connected with carbon capture and storage. The same simulation principles used in hydrocarbon reservoirs are now supporting climate and energy transition applications. Let us recap the key learning points from today's lecture. First, reservoir simulation is a physics-based and computation-based tool for forecasting reservoir behavior. Second, it is grounded in mass conservation, momentum conservation, constitutive relationships, and numerical solution methods. Third, the simulation process requires careful workflow, data gathering, gridding, property definition, well controls, calibration, and interpretation. Fourth, reservoir simulation supports important practical applications across the full field life, from appraisal to mature development to late field optimization, and even CO2 storage. If you remember these 4 points clearly, then you have captured the essence of today's lecture. In the next lecture, we will move to recovery methods. That will connect very naturally with today's topic, because reservoir simulation is one of the main tools used to evaluate recovery strategies such as water flooding, gas injection, and enhanced oil recovery. So please keep today's concepts in mind, because they will help you understand why certain recovery methods work and how engineers assess them. That brings us to the end of today's lecture. Thank you very much for your attention. Reservoir simulation is a deep and powerful field, and today was an introduction to its core concepts and practical importance. If you have questions, please feel free to ask. Thank you.